Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Pop Art Hunter channel, and today we're going to be continuing our animation collecting series with talking about reference materials. And whether that be books, auction catalogs, websites, etc., so on and so forth, we're going to be chatting about that a little bit more. Now, when you're collecting, one of the things that you're going to want to have is some sort of materials that you can reference. Here's a book, Cell Magic. It goes into some of the basics of collecting cell animation. Auction catalogs, something like this. This is a one from Profiles in History, I believe. There's also, Sotheby's is another big auction house, and they have some great catalogs. And those are really cool ways of being able to go back and look at individual prices and starting prices or estimates for lots. Obviously, if you can get the prices realized sheets that you can attach to those later on, these are cool things to go back to and see, yeah, that's a legitimate piece. It was sold at this auction, and kind of trace that lineage of where it came from. And a lot of the newer websites have, some sort of a database or tracking system. When these catalogs first came out, they really didn't. And this was it. You got a paper catalog in the mail. That's the only way you knew about the auction. You weren't looking at it on the internet as much. And that was the way that you could see what was coming up, and then also what things have sold for in the past and whether or not they were legitimate or not. It can add some credibility. We talked about that in the past. As far as if your pieces are legitimate, if they were sold at a reputable auction house, it doesn't necessarily 120,000% mean that it's real. Obviously, Picassos have been forged before, but these auction houses do more more due diligence oftentimes than some of the lower auction houses. You don't necessarily have all the paperwork and documentation, and so it adds a little bit of credibility to it. But these types of books are a great way to be able to make those references for some of the older pieces or get some of the original lineage, because the newer auction houses have the databases, the want lists, the tracked history that you can search, and that's actually much more convenient. If you open up any of these books, you're like, I'm looking for this particular piece. There's no Control F and being able to search through the document. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at some of these a little bit more closely, and these might be some pieces that you want to consider getting for your collection, some reference materials, or at least to know about them is a plus. So let's go ahead and get started looking at some of them a little bit more in depth. So depending on what you collect, collecting auction catalogs can also be a great resource for you if you want to reference pieces to try to trace whether or not they're legitimate and if they've been sold before and things like that, but also prices. These catalogs will have a lot of times some nice photographs of pieces so that you can sort of compare and contrast with other pieces you might see. Typically, these larger auction houses have a little bit more due diligence on making sure pieces are authentic. Not that things cannot be forgeries, etc., but a lot of times, these are a little bit more trustworthy. Don't let your guard down, but they're a little bit more trustworthy in that. And they'll have, again, some larger scale photos on the higher end pieces, some smaller photos on the lower end pieces, but it's a great way to see, some of them will have ranges set, for this particular piece, it's a $400 to $600 range. That doesn't mean it's going to sell for that. It could sell for a lot less or a lot more. And so it gives you just a range, but you can also look up this particular auction then at the auction house. This one was profilesinhistory.com. And so I could go to Animation Auction 58 and print out a prices realized sheet that I can then attach within here. I didn't do that yet on a lot of the ones I'm going to be showing you today, but here or there. But I would say you can print those out, and then you would have those as a reference material. Some of these auctions will have these items that are placed in a database online, and I'll show you a little bit more about that in just a bit. So that was Profiles in History. Here's a few catalogs from Sotheby's. These are specifically for individual auctions for one particular Disney movie. So you got Lion King, Art of the Little Mermaid, you got Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and then Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And so these will specifically be auctions with pieces from those specific movies only. Sometimes, and you need to be careful and read appropriately, especially with these newer Disney movies, these are often either one-of-a-kind created cells specifically for these auctions, or they are limited edition or series cells or something like that for the particular movie. These newer Disney movies didn't use traditional animation methods, and so a lot of times for like auctions like this or something like that, or just for the collector's market or for severe Disney fans, they would make special cells cells for these purposes for the fans, even though they didn't use them in the actual production of the work. So yeah, having these to be able to compare and contrast and see what's legitimate or not, to know how many pieces are out there, how many things are available. I mean, when you look at Lion King, for not having a lot of cells that were used in the film because they didn't use that mechanism, there's a lot of cells available. So where are these at and who has them? And if you find a piece one time and you're like, this is a really cool piece, it's not exactly what I would like, maybe reference this to see if there's a better piece that's out there, even though you might not know where it is or it might not come up for sale very often, or maybe even ever. You'll at least be a little bit more educated about it. So here's some things from Sotheby's. Also, we have Heritage Auctions, which is another big auction house. This is in Texas. These are actually newer catalogs. So this is from December of 2020. Depending on when you're watching this, they might be newer. But December of 2020. But because these are newer, there's actually, these items are all within the Heritage Auctions database online. So if you go in there and you search for, Pinocchio or Alice in Wonderland as an example, you'll come up with these items within that. I'm flipping through this and I'm seeing things that I would have wanted to buy if I had known, if I had paid more attention. So you might actually find them, and then they'll have the prices within there. And it's a lot easier to search online than to come through this catalog. So let's say I'm like, oh boy, I really like something from Ren and Stimpy. Well, where is it? Or do I even start? How do I try to find it within this catalog? But online, it's much easier. Some of the catalogs I have are from older auctions or things that I purchased where they didn't have these things listed online and they weren't available on the internet. So I still like to keep the physical catalogs. I think it's almost its own little collection of art pieces, and you can kind of browse through and get ideas, or try to find different genres or new types of art you didn't know existed. Because sometimes if you go online, you don't really know what to search for if you don't know what you're looking for. And so I found some new types of artwork or new concept stuff, or like when I first started collecting, I wasn't really familiar with like title card sequences or the Keymaster backgrounds. And so sometimes this can be an educational tool to learn what you're purchasing. And actually, it's also kind of fun. As I was flipping through, I noticed a piece I actually purchased. So I actually bought this piece. So I was looking, and there it is. So it's kind of cool to see the stuff that you've also purchased as well. Now, beyond auction catalogs, there's also some other resource guides. Sotheby's put out this book about animation art, and this more goes through the studios available. It gives you some basic information about cells, very basic, you layer them on top of each other, and it creates a scene. But it also gives more information about the different studios and some of that stuff. So, table of contents, what is animation art, what to look for, etc. And then talks about, the Disney movies, the first pictures, MGM, other studios, TV animation, just gives a little background. So books like this can give you some information. I mean, you can find a lot of this stuff online. A lot of it comes with experience, but it's never bad to have, a resource that you can look stuff up and gain more information. Then you also have books that will cover different types of animation, almost as like a price guide of sorts. This one is pretty much a price guide. They give you a little bit of background information about film sales and collecting, and just some basic info, but then it gets into pricing. So they'll list all the pieces, and they'll list the sale prices for them. And this runs the gamut for Disney, as far as the different films they had, but it's all just between these years, 1911 and 1953, which covers a lot of the early stuff. So it's a great place to start if you're collecting that time frame. You can come here, and this can be a resource for you to know roughly how much the prices were at the time that they sold, and not necessarily the time of this publishing, but the time that they sold. And this book is from 1995, and so this is one example. And again, these are Disney only films. And then here's another one, Masters of Celluloid, and this one actually looks just at Ceracel's and limited editions, pretty much. And so it'll give you the edition size. From the show The Critic, it was 330s. It didn't sell out. It wasn't signed. It was $50 at the time that they sold it. Now, this information might not be accurate, as of the publishing of this video and or when you look at it, but it gives you a good idea of what's available out there, and can also help you in knowing whether something might be a forgery or being marketed as a authentic, one-of-a-kind, used-in-production cell, but it actually was a limited edition. And some of the limited editions may or may not be numbered on the cell itself, or may have different seals, or they may have just come with documentation that said this is cell number blank and blank. And so if someone is selling something as an original production used, one-of-a-kind, sat down, put on camera, click, it's in the film, you can line it up with the shot, but you find it in here, it's the exact same looking cell. Sometimes if it's too good to be true, I would love to find an original Happy Happy Joy Joy from Ren and Stimpy. I don't think I'm ever going to find it, but if I find it and I'm like, that seems too good to be true, you can almost check a book like this to say, is it too good to be true? Now, if you collect limited editions and stuff like that, this is a good place to start to say, what's available? I can specifically search for this because I know it exists. I know that there's a limited edition. I know it had 5,000 pieces. That's going to be within my price range. And so this can be a good resource there. So that's another type of book that you can use. And then the last one we'll look at is this Cell Magic. There's a lot of animation cell books. I like this one because it's it gets into some of the... It's basic, but it gets pretty complex pretty quick, in my opinion. So if you're not familiar with how cells work, like the peg holes and how the punching registration system works, this goes through some of the examples of it and how things change, and can give you, just more information about how that operates, and more so than the other book that was saying, we put layer 1 on top of layer 2 on top of layer 3, or A, B, or C. This gets in a little bit more in depth on some of those areas and shows you what it's like. It also gives some recent sales from across the country. It's an older book, so it's not that recent. It gives you some tips on proper framing and some of those things. It tells you some of the things like field size for the 12 field cells versus a 16 field cell. So like this book is like a crash course in animation, and so it can be a good reference piece or material, a good thing that you can recommend or borrow, borrow, one of those. The proper grammar word to give someone. You loan it to them, they borrow it from you. So you can loan them a book like this, and that will get them started in the right direction. Or again, it can be a refresher for yourself, or if you're trying to find some details about a particular aspect of cell collecting. So that's another type of book for you. So the bottom line is that you want to educate yourself about art collecting, or at least animation cell art collecting, or sketches or concept art. You want to be educated as you go in, so that you pay the best price for the pieces you're getting, so that you're getting authentic pieces, so that you can kind of trace the lineage, so you know how to frame these things. All of these things are part of the education process. A lot of that's going to come from just hands-on investing. Some of the best mistakes are the most expensive mistakes. The first time that you damage a cell because you didn't treat it properly, or you framed it in a bad way, or you had something sticking to the back and you ripped it off and paint came off. Those are sometimes really sad, but great education lessons. But you can also avoid some of those pitfalls by having, reference materials like these books, by having websites and forums and Discord channels and groups, Facebook groups and things like that. Any of those social media areas that you can find like-minded individuals who are also collecting that you can get advice from. And so these books are just one piece of that puzzle. For me, I like to reference them. Some of the methods that they recommend seem simplistic, but sometimes simplicity adds power. They're the best approaches, and they've been the best approaches for so long, and that's why they're the best approaches, is they gotta stand the test of time. You can overcomplicate things sometimes. Other times, the methods that they talk about, or some of the recommendations when they're talking about the market value and how things fluctuate, they were looking at the market of animation cells in a different way, 20, 30, 40 years ago, where they just thought, man, this is what the market's like. But now it's drastically changed, and it could change even from here. And so I recommend getting reference materials, whether those are online databases or groups and forums, or kind of expanding that network of individuals that you talk to and that collect, or also some of these print things, old books, catalogs, and things of that nature. It depends on what you're collecting and the specifics, but can't recommend enough to keep educated, whether that is print, digital, or social networking. Thanks for watching the Pop Art Hunter channel, and we will see you next time.